morning. Well, I think it's important to cautiously support our businesses who've really struggled over the last 60 months. I'm here on the roof garden of John Lewis in Oxford Street, having used the tube to get air. And we've got to recognise is particularly in hospitality, in culture, in the nighttime economy, in retail, these businesses have really struggled. We shouldn't just abandon all the things we've learned over the last 60 months. That's one of the reasons why on public transport in London, it is a condition of carriage, it is the rules, you've got to wear a face mask, because we know the public health advice is very simple. If you wear a face mask, it reduces the chances of transmission. So where you can't keep a social distance when you're indoors, wear a face mask. But I think we should be encouraging people to safely enjoy culture, enjoy hospitality and enjoy retail.
I think it's the first time I spoke to you for some months when you haven't been wearing a mask. Are you adapting your personal mask wearing policy?
I've got to be quite careful, Adam, because I'm in such a good mood. I'm in danger of hugging people outdoors. And so not only am I not wearing a face mask when I'm outdoors safely like this, but I'm also tempering my own behaviour. It is lovely, I've got to tell you. It's just nice seeing people. It's nice being outdoors. People I've not seen for some time. People I've got to know over the last 16 months, never met in person. And so what I'd say to those watching is it's fantastic news that restrictions are being eased, but let's just be conscious of the fact the virus is still here. In London alone, on a daily basis, 4,000 new cases. Thank goodness, though, because of the high take-up of the jabs, the vaccines, what we're not seeing is massive increases in hospitals, and thankfully we're not seeing deaths as well. So the message is, if you've not had the jab yet, please take the jab, because the jabs are making a difference.
You have, though, laid down that people have got to wear masks on public transport. Would it have helped if the government had said that that was the national rule?
Yeah, it would have been. It would have been far easier. It would have had the benefit of being clear and obvious if we had one set of rules for the entire country. I'm disappointed they didn't, but I welcome the fact what the government didn't do was veto cities doing what they thought was right. They gave us the autonomy to do what we think is right. And that's why in London, because I've seen the evidence from the government's own advisors, SAGE, I've studied the evidence from the World Health Organization, the Centre for Disease Control and many others, I recognise that the evidence is quite clear. If you wear a face mask indoors, it reduces the chances of transmission. And for me, it's an additional layer of both protection and reassurance. So if you want to use public transport in London, you must wear a face mask.
Now, I don't know about John Lewis, but I imagine they've got quite a lot of staff who are having to isolate at the moment because they've been pinged or identified as having been in contact with someone who tested positive. Do you think this pinging system, which is now affecting 1.7 million people, is really necessary, given that we do have on-the-spot testing available?
I think the pinging and the test and trace is affecting not just essential services like Transport for London, the NHS, the police, the fire service, but also our businesses, particularly the small ones who may employ 11, 12 people and 4 or 5 are out of action because they've been pinged. And it's a big problem. What I want the government to do is to look into the possibility of bringing forward the date. It's currently the 16th of August, after which you don't need to self-isolate if you've had both jabs and you do a test. What I do know is many of us have now had both jabs, and we may be pinged, but we've not got the virus, and that's why it's really important for the government to look into whether it's a proportionate response now we've had both jabs, particularly when we know, for example, in London, I can give you the news that more than 10 million doses have been administered of the jab. More than 75% of those above the age of 40 have had both jabs, and so the response last year, the right response in relation to test and trace was sensible, but now, bearing in mind many of us have had both jabs, the government should look into whether it's a proportionate response and whether they should bring forward the 16th of August to an earlier date.
You've been looking at the data. How do you feel about vaccinating the under-18s, about vaccinating school children?
I'm really looking forward to what the JCVI say today. We've got to be guided by the science. Bear in mind that the summer holidays provides a really good circuit breaker, because children aren't in the classrooms passing the virus on, we'd kick ourselves if we didn't use that 6 weeks as an opportunity to get young people, particularly those who are vulnerable, having the jab. I'm guided by the science, so let's wait and see what the JCVI says. If they say that it's safe and it's the right thing to do and it helps younger people having the jab, I think we should make sure we work really hard over the 6 weeks to have as many young people as possible who are suitable, who may be vulnerable, getting the jab. So in September, what you don't see is the disruption we've seen in the last term.
Finally, away from COVID, obviously you have responsibilities for transport in London. What is your feeling now about e-scooters? We have seen a number of fatalities, both of people riding them and people not riding them. They are very prevalent in the city. I thought they hadn't been licensed yet. What's going on?
No, so they're unlawful, they're illegal, they're very dangerous. The Met Police Service are trying their best to enforce this law. It's a difficult law to enforce for obvious reasons. In some boroughs, there were 6 boroughs initially, there are now a couple more. They're piloting whether e-scooters is the way forward. And in those boroughs, you've got to go to one of the companies that hire out the e-scooters. The big advantage of that company is you've got to have a license or professional license, there's insurance, and there are safeguards in place. Only if you go to one of those boroughs where you hire an e-scooter is it lawful to do so. In any other circumstance, you're breaking the law.
And do you think it's like to stay like that, or will they just become a fact of life like, you know, bicycles and cars and motorbikes?
Look, one of the conundrums the government had, and this is why I support the pilot system, is the genie's out of the bottle. Many people are buying e-scooters as Christmas presents. And so I think we've got to be realistic there here. We've got to make sure, though, going forward, they are used only safely. And that's why the boroughs joined the pilot scheme to see how it worked out. If it's the case that the pilot scheme shows, in fact, you can't do it safely, they're dangerous, there's no response that is sensible, then, of course, they should continue to be outlawed. If it's the case the pilot scheme works and there's a system found where it's possible to hire an e-scooter in a safe way and it does improve the quality of life of yourself in relation to getting through traffic and not, add into the toxic air, then it's something we can look into. The pilot system is a good system to use to check whether something should be made permanent or, outlawed altogether. And so the boroughs that are having the pilots will wait and see what they show.